This is a crucial game for the Denver Broncos, coming off a really bad loss against the Indianapolis Colts, with the Chargers being 2-0. These two teams are going at it for the crown for the AFC West. The Chiefs are down, the Raiders are down. It is time for the Broncos to take their spot in the AFC West with this upcoming game, which we are all very excited about. How are we doing, Mark? We are here with Broncos Digest, and I'm Sebastian with your co-host. How are we doing?
Doing well. Super stoked for this game. Like you said, this is probably the biggest game of the season for them. Not only have they had kind of a tough start, both offensively and defensively in different facets of their two games so far this season. The interesting thing about the Chargers is they have the opportunity to sweep the AFC West in their first 3 weeks of the season. They beat the Chiefs in their first game of the season, which was a massive win for them. And then they dominated the Raiders the other night. Now playing the Broncos, and with a really strong offense being led by Justin Herbert, who's playing the most dynamic game of his career in these first two games. This is a really interesting opportunity. So arguably the biggest game of the season so far.
Oh, absolutely. It's kind of crazy that the schedule makers had, the Chargers playing all three divisional opponents for their first 3 weeks of the season. So they get like an early taste for the AFC West.
I was thinking about that. I feel like that can either work in your favor or against you, depending on the team you are. Like, there's a chance you can get off to a really bad start within your division and within the league as well. I just think Harbaugh and the Chargers, and especially, like I said, the way Justin Herbert is playing right now, people have been saying that he's playing like MVP level football, like he could end up being in the race for offensive MVP at the end of the year, which is pretty crazy. But the way the schedule worked out and the way that they're playing, it's working out in their favor. But hopefully the Broncos have something to say about it.
Yeah,
when
seriously.
they face off this weekend.
I mean, we know though that the Broncos, they weren't the same team they started out last year versus the team that they ended up being, especially by the time that playoffs came around. So it is interesting in that aspect that, the Chargers will be probably facing all these teams much later in the season, and they will all be very different teams, very different matchups. But as we said, all these games count the same, so we have to make sure that we get a good head start on this, because this is our chance right now to take our lead in the AFC West race. And all the Broncos players are very much aware of this. And I wanted to talk about just kind of like the way that the players are specifically talking about it. Bo Nix had to say, it's going to be a tough battle. We're going to have to play well in all three phases to get the job done. We feel confident, especially after going there last year and not being able to finish. We want to go over there and start the same way we did, and this time just finish the football game. I completely agree with kind of these sentiments that Bo is talking about, just that last year we really struggled in one-score games, and even this year, like, once again, it's been something that we've been struggling with a little bit. We finished the Titans game. It was ugly, but at least we finished it. But most other examples of the Bo Nix era of the Broncos and Sean Payton has been kind of frustrating endings to games. What's your analysis on that?
Well, I think the topic around these one-score games and playing full 1 hour long football games, if that makes sense, I think that's one of the most prominent topics around the conversation with the Denver Broncos right now. You look at last year, they were 1-6 in one-score games, very tough times playing against teams that were keeping it close. And then you look at the Colts game, Sean Payton and Bo Nix and a few of the other people within the organization talking about how they aren't able to finish a full football game right now. They shot themselves in the foot in the last 20 minutes of the game, specifically in the fourth quarter. And that's when Daniel Jones in Indianapolis was able to take advantage of mistakes that the Broncos were making. And regardless of that leveraging penalty call, at the end of the day, the Denver Broncos put themselves in a position where a field goal would win the game for the Colts. And they have to, like Bo Nix said, not just against the Chargers, but looking forward for the remainder of the season, they have to play complete full football games from the start of the game all the way up until the clock ticks down to zero. And I think that's one of the biggest learning experiences for the Broncos so far. And I think that what happened against Indianapolis is something that they are seriously considering and getting ready to take into Los Angeles this weekend.
I'm also glad that Bo Nix is mentioning the Chargers games from last year. They were kind of a tale of two cases where The first game, we got completely blown out for most of the game, but then made a late comeback, but fell short just because we ran out of time. And then the other game, the second game against the Chargers, we came out really strong and were leading them for most of the game, but the Chargers were able to stay in it and then finish the game themselves, where we kind of fell apart at the end. So it's really about, like you said, putting together one full hour of football and not, getting off to a nice sprint or starting off slow and trying to catch up at the end. It's all about really pacing yourself really, really well. And I'm hoping Sean Payton and the guys who are conditioning our players are telling and emphasizing, listen, these guys, they have a great coach. They have great conditioning. They play physical. It's about not trying to just match that, but also trying to match the pacing of it and just their stamina. So I think that's, I'm glad that Bo is bringing up those last two games, because it means that they're very aware of how those two games went, how last week went, that sting of last week, and maybe letting that fuel them for the game against the Chargers. So overall, I think that was just really, really good wording. And then Mike McGlinchey had to say that there's certainly an elevated sense of awareness of what's at stake here. I've never seen a schedule open up the way that they've opened up with the 3 divisional games. All of a sudden, if they beat us this weekend, they're 3-0 in the division. We've got to do everything we can to make sure that doesn't happen, and we're ready for the challenge. I mean, I really, really like just the way that he's talking about that, and that they know what's at stake. They know that this isn't just a week 3 game. Even if we go 1-2, we can come back. No, the Chargers already have a 2-0 lead in the division. They've won their 2 divisional games. If they beat us this week, they will have an immense lead on the rest of the teams, and especially the Broncos. So this is a crucial game to really kind of bring them back to earth, and also keep ourselves in the race, just to keep this marathon going. But yeah,
I mean, it's a very crucial game, and in the past, the Broncos have been kind of inconsistent in really high stakes games. As far as clinching the playoffs last year, it took them a few weeks to get that win to punch their ticket to the postseason last year. So obviously a little bit of concern around whether or not they understand from a social and a locker room and just a communication standpoint that the stakes are really high in this team or in this game. The question is can they translate that into how they play, and that can they play a complete game this weekend? But I mean, like you said, a lot of implications around everything that this game means as far as Denver hopefully being able to take the win. I mean, if you look at it from a bigger picture standpoint, Raiders fans, Raiders players, Chiefs fans, Chiefs players, everybody within this division besides the Chargers, everybody's rooting for the Broncos in this scenario because, like you said, and like Mike McGlinchey said, if the Chargers win, all of a sudden they're 3-0 and they've swept the division in their first 3 games.
Yeah.
That is a terrifying reality for not just within the AFC West, but within the entire AFC. All of a sudden they become a legitimate AFC contender to make it all the way through the postseason to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And that's something that's obviously very concerning, considering that that's a team that's within our division and a team that we're going to not only have to put up a really good fight against this weekend, but we're going to have to face them one more time coming in later in the season.
Yeah.
Another thing about just the Colts game, and something that I'm trying to keep in mind as far as keeping my hopes high and staying positive, is last year when the Broncos lost to the Chiefs the first time in brutal fashion, that blocked field goal, the game-winning field goal that was going to not only knock the Chiefs to be not undefeated anymore, but just for the Broncos to get that division win against the toughest divisional opponent in the season. After that heartbreaking game, they won 5 straight. And so hopefully there's another sense of mentality similar to that Chiefs game in the locker room that's they just lost to the Colts in really heartbreaking, really ugly fashion.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's motivating them to go on a tear and win, not just against the Chargers, but in some of these games looking forward in the next few weeks.
It does feel like they're feeling that sense of urgency this early on, which is really nice because, typically a sense of urgency happens later in the season when your games are limited, your opportunities are limited. Week 3, typically teams who aren't 0-2 aren't feeling the pressure as much. But it's good to hear the players talking like they are, like, listen, we know how much this game means because we know how much it means to the Chargers. We know how much that they want this win just as much as we do. So I think everybody will be watching this game. And then Tim Lynch from Mile High Report had to say, since the start of last season, the Broncos have gone 2-7 in one-score games. Their wins came against the New York Jets and Tennessee Titans. They flopped every other one-score game. These Broncos will never compete strongly in the AFC if they wilt against the pressure in big games so far. That's all they have done in the Bo Nix era. So very, very high criticism and harsh criticism from Tim Lynch. But I think it's warranted for the moment. I think that we have to look at, listen, we saw how the playoff game went against Josh Allen and the Bills. It was a very close game in the first half, and then we got completely blown out in the second half. We have to make sure that we play a full 60 minutes, that we're not just there just to be happy that we're in these big games, that we deserve to be there, and that we are competitors, not just participants. So I think that's just what the Broncos fans, coaches, and players are all looking for. They want meaningful games and meaningful wins to hang their hats on. Because I'd kind of challenge any Broncos fan, especially in the recent era, to say when was our most meaningful win. We had a really nice win against the Bills a couple years ago during the Russell Wilson years but in the end, we didn't make the playoffs. We didn't finish that season right. And, so it was a nice win at the time. It was a nice upset. But it's kind of like a Wake Forest in college, upsetting some big team. It didn't feel like, oh, we had catapulted ourselves to the next level in the NFL. And so the Broncos really have an opportunity here to establish themselves early. There was a lot of offseason hype, and maybe they heard a bit too much hype in the offseason and got ahead of themselves. So the Colts game brought them back down to earth, and now it's to play real ball against the Chargers, against a team that they're familiar with. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that point you make about establishing themselves early. They've done that in certain facets so far in this season. Each part of their game and the way that they play has been shown in a really positive aspect at certain points throughout this season. Now they have the opportunity to take all of those facets and combine them into one perfect football game. You look at the Titans game. That was a remarkable performance by the Broncos defense against Tennessee, against the number one overall pick, Cam Ward. And then you look at the Colts game, the offense came to play, and Bo Nix found his groove, and he found his guys and his receivers in the way that he wants to play offensively this year. You take that offense in the week 2 game, you take the defense in the week 1 game. Hopefully the special teams kinks have worked themselves out of these 2 weeks as well, and you mash that all together. That's what the Broncos need. They need to make a complete 100% performance of all aspects of the way that they play football and put that out on the field at SoFi Stadium this weekend.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And then J.K. Dobbins, speaking of going back to SoFi Stadium for a little bit of revenge, why are the Chargers throwing the ball so much is what Denver Broncos, the covering all Broncos sports Twitter account had to mention. And then there was a quote from J.K. Dobbins that said, "They let number 27 go. Maybe that's why. Nah, I'm just messing around." And then, the Broncos account finished by saying J.K. Dobbins has his sights set high as he prepares to face off against his former team. Now, I want to ask, do we think that there's anything to make of J.K. Dobbins potentially having a breakout game this weekend? Because I think that a lot of people were setting their sights on RJ Harvery. He was a really exciting young guy that we got out of the draft in the second round. A bit of a surprise pick to a lot of people, but everyone knew that we were looking for playmakers. But I thought J.K. Dobbins was just as much of an impact player and impact signing when we made that. So, and especially for this game, he made the decision not to return to the Chargers, but came to the Broncos instead, believing in what we're doing here even more so. So, I just wanted to ask, do you think Jacob Dobbins has a chance for a breakout game this weekend?
I absolutely do. And that's what I'm hoping to see, not only from a player standpoint, but from a coaching standpoint as well. You can also, raise the conversation as to who Sean Payton is going to prioritize as his number one weapon of keeping the ball on the ground. Does he want to show off his new toy in RJ Harvey, or does he want to stick to the veteran J.K. Dobbins? And I think the clear answer here is, regardless of his history with the Chargers, just the fact that he's come into this team and he's shown that he is worthy of that RB1 position. Last week he had 14 carries, 76 yards, and a touchdown. He's clearly the guy for keeping the ball on the ground and getting offensive production using the run game. Mm-hmm. And so whether or not he has the opportunity to, have a revenge game or any of that kind of stuff, he's the clear answer for who I would try to consistently use throughout this coming game. But I mean, just with that in mind, combined with the fact that he is returning to SoFi Stadium, I mean, in the same press conference you were referencing just a few minutes ago, he was asked about, the emotions for returning to SoFi, if he's expecting to see some friends and all that stuff. And, he was very humble about it. He talked very briefly about how he was excited to be back around those fans and excited to, see some old friends and stuff like that. But the biggest encompassing point of that conversation with him is he is now a Denver Bronco, and his priority is to win the game wearing the orange and blue uniform and play the best possible football and the best possible running game that he can. And so I think the humbleness aspect to that answer and just what we've seen from him so far, what we've seen could be like a precursor to him getting ready to have a breakout game. So I very much could expect a little bit of a J.K. Dobbins revenge tour this weekend. I'm very excited for it.
Yeah, fantasy watchers, make sure that you have him on your sites. I feel like there might be something big happening this weekend with J.K. And then lastly, I think it is also worth mentioning that that Bo Nix himself has had a tremendous success in AFC West games, in particular in divisional games. He has 14 touchdowns to only 1 interception going against divisional opponents and a 112.2 passer rating. He has at least 2 passing touchdowns in every divisional game. So this guy comes to play. It's just a matter about finishing games against these big opponents. These games there's been a lot of close ones. And then, the Raiders games, we were obviously able to sweep them last year and finish the games, but they're under a new regime this year, so it's going to be a different challenge. And the Chargers, they're under, a sophomore year for Jim Harbaugh. A lot of this is going to come down to, okay, we understand that we are against Titans in a lot of aspects. We'll be facing the Chiefs later in the year when they'll have a lot of their weapons back. So it's less about figuring out if Bo Nix can play in these big games, in these divisional games. But I think if he can withstand the season and not just have a roller coaster of a season, I think he needs to be consistent more than anything. And that statistic to me is more indicative that, listen, if he's familiar with your team, if he knows that, like, I know how to play your team, that he will minimize the mistakes. And that's something that I'm really excited about, is that Bo might be actually primed for a really good game, because this is our first divisional game of the season.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And I think that consistency aspect, especially with a quarterback like Bo Nix, it comes with time. You look at his rookie season last year, a rough start, honestly, in those first 2 games, even 3 games, really starting to settle into playing at the NFL level. And then he comes in this year and he's starting to work out some kinks as well, struggling a little bit in certain aspects of his game and how he plays quarterback in these first few games. A lot of things that I keep seeing all over social media that I 100% agree with is nobody's waiting for Bo Nix to have his breakout game of the season in week 1 or week 2. That kind of stuff comes with time. So you have to trust in the process, trust in what the coordinators, what Joe Lombardi, the offensive coordinator, and what Sean Payton are doing in the coaching room, and what they're kind of trying to preach to him. And just think about the fact that consistency and elite playmaking comes with time, and we're going to start to see that continue to develop. I mean, just look at the transition from week 1 to week 2 and how Bo Nix fixed mistakes and improved at that quarterback position. I think we're going to keep seeing improvement throughout the rest of the season.
I completely agree. And I'm really excited about the opportunity for Bo to really show his big game potential. I think that there's yet to be on prime time, I guess last year there was the Browns game where he had a couple of really good throws that people really got excited about, but it was only against Jameis Winston, who's a career backup at this point. We want someone where it's like Justin Herbert, he's a early MVP candidate. A lot of people are excited that is he is he primed for a playoff run and a late career explosion. But for Bo, I think, just because he came into the league a bit older than what he's used to, I don't think that means that he isn't capable of having extreme growth and extreme explosions in the same sense. I think that there's even more opportunity considering how much growth we saw over the last season. If we keep seeing that progress, I think that he has an even higher ceiling than Justin Herbert in just the aspect of his attitude and the way that he approaches the game. You see him arguing with Sean Payton. You see him just passionately telling receivers where they should be and where they shouldn't be. I don't see Justin Herbert getting mad that very often. I see him very kind of not socially awkward, but very calm demeanor. And maybe you could say that's an advantage, but I like a fiery guy. I like a guy who has a fire in his gut. It reminds me of Tom Brady. It reminds me of some of the best quarterbacks that have played this game. And so, not that I'm saying that Bo Nix will be that, but at the same time, I am a believer. So it's I do think that this is a great game and a great matchup, because I think both the Chiefs and Raiders will be watching very closely to see who comes out on top and who's the real king of the division this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it's an opportunity across all sorts of facets for the Denver Broncos. Bo Nix looking to try to find his groove and improve a little bit. The defense looking to make a crazy comeback after their performance last week against the Colts. And then from like an offensive standpoint, you're looking at J.K. Dobbins, who wants to have his breakout game against his former team. Courtland Sutton is yet to have a lot of action. He had one reception in the game last week against the Indianapolis Colts. We saw a little preview of what that Oregon connection looks like with Bo Nix and Troy Franklin last week, hoping to see more of that. So just a lot on the table in what I think is a season-defining game for the Broncos this weekend. Win against the Chargers, it puts a really positive taste in your mouth going forward for what you're going to try to do for the remainder of the season. And then even, this could be a hot take, but even losing, but putting up a good fight and keeping the game close, I even think that sets a strong tone looking forward, rather than just getting blown out by Harbaugh and Herbert and the rest of the Chargers. That would be worst case scenario, and I think it could really derail this season for Bo Nix in his second career year and everybody else within the Broncos organization.
I agree. Anything to avoid a demoralizing loss, but at the same time, I think this team is too talented and too well coached to allow that to happen. So, but we'll see. Any given Sunday, things always happen. But at the same time, we want to ask you guys, let us know in the comments below what you think is going to happen this Sunday. Do you think that the Chargers are actually overrated, maybe underrated? Do you think that this is their year? Do you think it's our year? This game is really going to tell us a lot about both teams and about the division in general. We're really excited. I anticipate having a pretty emotional reaction to the game afterwards, one way or another. So it'll be interesting and only a few days away. But yeah, sound in the comments, subscribe, all that good stuff. And any final words, Mark?
I don't think so. I'm really hoping we can pull this win out here, and that we can, show the division and just this, this game specifically that, we've come to play. And, like you said about making the playoffs last year and kind of more just being happy to be there rather than actually fighting for that spot to move on to the next round. Like, this is our year where we've now gotten a taste of what it's like to be back in the postseason, and we're not ready to just clinch that spot again. We're ready to clinch that spot and take it as far as we can go with it and get ourselves back into the positions that we were in during the Peyton Manning era. And so I'm very excited for the future of this team, and I think that this game this weekend is really important for the remainder of the season.
Yep, absolutely. Well, with that said, all Broncos fans, just make sure you stay subscribed, stay tuned. We'll have more updates, but we can't wait to talk about this game once it's happened. Until then, we will see you in the next video.